All right, all right, all right. Hello. Welcome to August, or that's what it'll be when this video comes out. The month of Leos. And my family and my spouse's family really decided to just have everybody gets born during the time of Leo. So we're just a family full of Leos, and beginning at the end of August to beginning at the end of July to August, we just have all the birthdays. So that's what's going on in my neck of the woods, and that's what's keeping me busy. So today had a chance just to sit down and think about the next X-Files analysis video I wanted to do. And that is the season 6 episode Milagro, aka the self-insert Dana Scully fanfiction episode of the X-Files. We'll talk a little bit about how this episode is kind of metaphorical for writers, and especially fanfiction writers and any kind of transformative or creative person in the fandoms. Milagro is a season 6 episode. It's extremely close to my heart. It is back to back with the episode Alpha, another episode that's very close to my heart. I really wanted to do a 2-parter episode where I talked about Alpha and Milagro because it's kind of similar themes in both episodes, but I do not have time. So I think I'm going to do Milagro this week and do Alpha next week. So in the episode Milagro, there's this guy, and his name's Philip Paget. Philip Paget, not the AO3 writer Philip Paget, who's awesome and amazing and not a murderer. So that's good. Love you, Philip Paget. You're making great fan fiction for us X-Files fans. So Philip Paget is this writer in the X-Files episode. Philip Paget is, and he's trying to write the great American novel. Boy, that's an original idea, isn't it? And he meets Scully one day in an elevator, and my boy is besotted. There's this scene in the Disney Pixar movie Inside Out where Joy and Sadness meet the unicorn in Riley's dream, and they both walk up to the unicorn, and Joy is just freaking out, pissing her pants, and Sadness points at Joy and she's like, "My friend says you're famous." And I always joke with my daughter, and I'm like, when we meet Gillian Anderson, this is how we're going to act. You're going to be Sadness pointing at me and saying, "My friend says you're famous." Anyway, that's the way Philip Paget reacts when he sees Scully. He reacts like anybody would react when they meet Gillian Anderson. And you get these really up close shots of Scully's lips, and I know Mr. Paget is objectifying her, and that's a no-no, but you know what? We get those up close shots of her lips. Scully is visibly uncomfortable. It really hurts my heart just how uncomfortable she gets in this episode. Boy, season 6 is all about Scully just being uncomfortable around creepy people, isn't she? So she gets off the elevator, and wouldn't you know it, it's Mulder's apartment building. Creepy stalker dude is Mulder's next door neighbor, and Scully has this look on her face like, "Oh shit, really, universe? You're gonna deal me this too? Okay, all right." So she's what is the John Mulaney quote? "Well, life is already weird enough. This might as well happen." So Scully goes into Mulder's apartment. She's like, "Hey, you got a new neighbor." And he's like, yeah, he's a writer. And turns out Mr. Paget is writing a self-insert fan fiction about Scully, in which he is the self-insert OC. And so he is writing this book, and what happens in the book seems to be what is happening in the book. Art is inspiring life. Like, these murders are coming true in the real world. And Mulder believes that he's the one orchestrating this because Mulder's the skeptic. Really love episodes where Mulder's the skeptic, because where Mulder is the quote skeptic, because I believe Mulder is the skeptic anyway. He's just using his beliefs in the paranormal as a crutch. And I believe Scully is the true believer. And that's beside the point. So he believes that Mr. Philip Paget is orchestrating these murders with the, what do they call him? The self-proclaimed Brazilian psychic surgeon. This is going to be my episode where I just relate everything to the movie Inside Out. The movie Inside Out is my favorite movie ever. So just put a pin in that. The scene where Riley's mom is kind of spacing out and she remembers the Brazilian helicopter pilot. And then, spoilers, at the end of the movie, Riley's teacher has also had her encounters with the Brazilian helicopter pilot. Come fly with me, Kachina. Me and my daughter quote that like once a week at least. Excuse me. I have a terrible migraine, so I'm drinking a cherry Dr. Pepper with a shot of Jack Daniel's Fireball whiskey in a Ball Infinity aluminum cup. Cheers. To the Brazilian psychic surgeon. This character in his book is the Brazilian psychic surgeon, and he's running around murdering people. And so the whole episode is just him stalking Scully, being a gigantic creep, and writing his OC self-insert fan fiction. I don't want to talk about this episode in a linear fashion. I kind of want to talk about it point by point. Excuse me. As you can see, I'm drinking cherry Pepsi. I believe, is this episode a kind of commentary on not just writers, but fan fiction writers, and particularly fan fiction writers in the X-Files fandom. Remember, this was made in I think this episode was made in 1998 or maybe 1999. And the X-Files fandom was a fandom that was coming of age in the time the internet was coming of age. That was really gaining prevalence in our society. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the X-Files fandom, or you're new to the X-Files fandom, I've been a part of the X-Files fandom since I was 11 years old. I'm going to be 38 in a few days. I don't think you understand the force of nature the X-Files fandom is. The X-Files fandom kind of laid down the unwritten rules of how fandom people interact in and with fandoms today. And back then, fandom was kind of a nerd thing. It was not the kind of thing kids, especially kids in the environment I grew up in, bragged about. Like, you were very much seen as a nerd. And nowadays, fandom's enormous. From whatever TV shows, comic books, video games, television series, movies. Like, fandom's a big fucking deal. fandom takes on sometimes a bigger life than the source material that it inspired. X-Files was one of the first pieces of media that like really did that. And the internet was a big factor in doing that. But fandom is a double-edged sword. I've been in fandom since I was 5 years old. And I've picked up my first X-Men comic. And I've been in fandoms before the onset of the internet in our society and after. And I gotta say, the people I've met in fandom, in various fandoms, have become some of my closest friends. And I have relationships with people I've met in fandoms that's closer than siblings. I consider them my sisters. That being said, fandom can be extremely toxic. If you're familiar with fandom, you might have heard of the term gatekeeping, where fans are like, only this particular kind of person can enjoy this character or this show. Or maybe you're familiar with toxic positivity. How dare you criticize this show writer or this showrunner or my favorite character? How dare you do that? Don't you know you can only say positive things in this space? Yeah. Please excuse me. Anyway, yeah. And especially with a tool like the internet where you don't always talk face to face with people, bullying is prevalent, and a fandom space can become very toxic. I almost think this episode is kind of a commentary on that. And it makes it very relevant in today's society where the internet and fandom go hand in hand. A leaf fell in my cherry Dr. Pepper, and I'm not going to eat it. Garniche with pecan leaves, right? So I also believe this episode now is it a commentary on that? I don't know. That's how I interpret this, is like fandoms, especially when you are interacting with actors and actresses, you know, in a TV series, and you're part of that fandom, that can get very toxic as well. Now, like, I made a joke at the beginning, like, Philip Paget looks at Scully the way anyone would look when they meet Gillian Anderson. And, you know, I want me and my daughter to meet Gillian Anderson someday, you know, because I greatly admire her work. I think she's a great role model for young girls. And, you know, her work greatly influenced me. And I've watched her stuff since I was a little girl, you know, and it would mean the world to me to shake her hand and say thanks, you know, for doing this for me. But in the same breath, I understand that Gillian Anderson is a human being. You know, she has hopes, she has dreams, she has flaws, she has kids, she has pets, you know, and to objectify a human being, you don't need to do that, you know, like, to do that's really creepy, you know. So I believe this episode and the character of Philip Paget is kind of a commentary on how toxic fandoms can become, especially in interacting with the actors and actresses or writers or creators or whoever within the series that inspired their fandom, you know. What it is more blatantly a commentary on are writers. I'm a writer. I've been writing since I could pick up a pencil. Some of the scenes in this episode hit. And I think if you're not a writer, they're really hard to understand. Like, I was watching it with my spouse. He's not a writer. My spouse is also not a reader. And that's okay. Some people don't read and don't write for enjoyment or for careers. And that's fine. That's okay. My spouse is a very hands-on person. Like, my spouse can, you know, wire electricity in a house, but he can't sit down and read a chapter in a book. That's okay. That's fine. Some people are like that, you know. I'm very much a writer. My spouse didn't get these scenes that hit with me. Like at the end where Philip Paget meets his character, the Brazilian psychic surgeon. That very much hit with me. Like, yeah, when you're a writer of fiction, your characters become more real than the people around you, you know, in reality. Also the scenes where Mulder's spying on this guy, like listening through his air vents or hooking up the camera to like spy into his apartment. Like, and from Mulder's point of view, you know, he's just like, Philip Paget is just sitting there talking to the air, you know, like, while from his Philip Paget's point of view, it's like having vivid, and I mean very vivid experiences and encounters. That also is very relatable for me. Like, I see, as a writer, I see an imaginary world that's very vivid. It's very colorful. It pops. And to a person talking to me, it's like, what is she doing? Like, also, you could take Philip Paget to be autistically coded. I am neurodivergent on the autistic spectrum. You know, I have a very hard time having social interactions with people. I have a very hard time with social cues. But, you know, I communicate with people very well through writing fiction and through creating content and creating art, you know. I believe Philip Paget is autistically coded. And that's kind of strange because in the episode prior to this, Alpha, Karen, the dog lady, is also autistically coded. Alpha's a fantastic episode. It's another one of those episodes that I love that's on a lot of people's X-Files most hated episode watches. Karen just wants to be left alone with her 26 dogs. That's me. Leave me the fuck alone, okay? I just want to be with my 26 dogs, drop some food off with goddamn Uber Eats, and I'm good. Just leave me alone, okay? Karen's not bothering anyone, all right? I always tell people I really want to hate Karen and Philip Paget, and I can't do it. These characters, I relate to them more strongly than I do any other characters on the X-Files. So, Philip Paget is writing this fiction, and it's coming true in the real world. Mulder arrests him. He confiscates his book, but not before some very cringy scenes with Scully. So this psychic surgeon guy is like pulling out people's hearts and then holding them up like goddamn Dances with Wolves. And how many times am I going to reference Dances with Wolves in these videos? And Scully goes to this church where she sees a painting of, what is it, St. Mary Margaret, and her heart was taken out, and Jesus set it on fire, which is a pretty fucking metal thing to do, with the flames of charity. That's not a metaphor for anything erotic, is it? And Scully goes and looks at this painting, and then Philip Paget shows up and starts it being extremely creepy. Again, this is a metaphor for fans interacting with actors and actresses. And Scully is so uncomfortable. It makes my stomach hurt when I see her be this way, because every woman and girl I know has been in a situation like that, where you're like, this guy's being extremely creepy. I'm extremely scared. She's like, And poor Jillian, like, again, Jillian, just give her all the Emmys. God damn. She's got all the Emmys, I'm sorry. So she's, you know, her body language is so, like, get me away from this fucking creep. She plays that really well for Scully, who is a FBI agent, but Scully's also a woman, and she is a victim of sexual abuse and a victim of a lot of abuse. And, you know, it's pretty cool that Jillian, like, portrays Scully in a way where it's like she's encountering this creep, but she's reliving the past traumas she's been through. Like, god damn, Gillian Anderson, what a fucking star. Anyway, I could just gush for Gillian Anderson for 30 minutes, but I don't have time for that. So he's like, hey, you and I are a lot alike. And she's like, get the fuck away from me, creep. That's one thing I really like about the episode is, like, Philip Paget keeps saying, we're a lot alike, you and I. And she's like, get the fuck away from me. That's great. I'm so glad they didn't go down the path of, like, oh, he does understand me. Bella Swan, Edward Cullen style. I'm glad she's just like, you're a creep. Get the fuck away from me. So then Philip Paget starts writing fan fiction. And you know, Philip Paget, you should have just stuck with that, my guy. Just write fan fiction, man. Like, fan fiction's not going to hurt anyone. Just make sure it's about consenting adults. And don't murder people, Philip Paget. Or don't let your characters murder people. So, he writes these very scenes where Scully's having having sex with him. And that's what confused me when I was a kid. And I watched this when I was 13. And, like, you see Scully, like, go to his place and she's taking off her clothes. And a lot of people say she had sex with him, but even when I was 13, I was like, no, he's writing that. Because then later on, she, like, finds his charm that he left her. Again, goddamn. Philip Paget, just write fan fiction. Don't be a fucking creep, man. And then she comes to his apartment. She's like, you dropped this. And then she's like, oh, you don't have any furniture. You know, she's like sussing his place out. She's obviously never seen it before. Okay. Anyway, they didn't have sex. He's just a big fucking creep. Anyway, she goes into his apartment and I'm like, baby, no, don't do that. And again, she's so uncomfortable. And Philip Paget is like, I'm like, guy, I wanted to like you and I wanted to relate to you, but why do you have to be such a big fucking creep? Like, she's like, I'm uncomfortable with this. And he's like, why? You're armed, aren't you? And I'm like, oh, God, smarmy nice guy. Gaslighting a woman and downplaying her fears. Like, no, my dude. When you see a woman being that uncomfortable, be like, hey, okay, I see I'm making you very uncomfortable. Let's meet at a public place where you, or maybe don't meet at all if you don't want to. But no, a man respecting women in the X-Files? Oh my God, what a novel idea. Anyway, then there's this very hilarious scene where, like, Mulder, who is just riding that green-eyed monster in this episode, comes into the apartment and it's very dark and he's like got his gun pointed forward and he's like looking for Scully and she's like, Mulder, what the fuck are you doing? She doesn't say fuck, but that's what she means. Mulder puts him under arrest and they take him to jail and they have these long talks about Carl Jung. About how the characters influence the writer instead of the writer influencing the characters. And again, I want to hate Philip Paget, but you know what? I think that way too, so I can't hate him completely. Anyway, Scully's like, hey, saying to Mulder, she's like, hey, bitch, I found you're a Brazilian psychic surgeon. And Mulder's like, great, yeah, let's crack it. And she's like, he's dead. He's like, oh, fuck. And she's like, he gives Philip Paget his book back. And then there's a very shippy moment where Mulder goes to bitch slap Philip Paget. And Scully, like, puts her hand on his wrist. And that's a great MSR moment where it's like, Scully immediately grounds him. And I'm not the biggest fan of MSR, but that's a pretty hot scene, okay? Like, you know, like I said, Mulder's problematic behavior puts a fly in the ointment of the MSR I loved when I was a kid, but some scenes, it's like, that one is fucking hot, you know? Why couldn't Mulder be that way all the time? Anyway, and then, of course, there's the MSR scene most fans remember from this episode where Philip Paget turns around and he's like, I made a mistake in my book. And he said, I said that Agent Scully falls in love, but you know what? She's already in love. And Mulder's standing there looking like a goddamn dumb moth. And Scully's looking at him, and I'm like, get it together, guy. It's because he's like, who's she in love with? I don't know. She's in love with you, you fucking idiot. It won't be the last time Mulder's an idiot in this episode. Anyway, they go back to the cemetery where the first murder was. The two teenage lovers in this episode are really cute. And I'm really sad they die. Oh, shit. Cherry Pepsi's good. So, they go back to the cemetery. They find the girl dead. And then Mulder and Scully spy on Philip Paget. And again, he's having this very vivid encounter with his character, the Brazilian psychic surgeon. And when Mulder looks in with his video equipment, he just sees Philip Paget in an otherwise empty room. The Brazilian psychic surgeon is like, you imagine me so clearly, you bring me to life. And Philip Paget is like, how can I end this book? And he's like, well, you gotta kill Scully, bitch. And again, like, a really great one thing I want to point out is how Mulder, like, he can't see this from Philip Paget's point of view, which I think is very strange because in the episode, Scully, like, points out to Mulder, he's like, how can someone do this? And she's like, maybe he just imagined these things very clearly, like Shakespeare, or like Young, or like you. And she says, you know, you're a profiler. You imagine the killer's motives. It really is strange to me that Mulder cannot see things from Paget's point of view. When Mulder is supposed to be this brilliant profiler. That's one of the things about the X-Files that just irritates me. They keep telling you, Mulder's a brilliant profiler. He's a brilliant profiler. Look at what a brilliant profiler is. And he never fucking profiles anything. He can't profile his own ass. Like, what is it? 2 or 3 episodes, he actually does some profiling. Scully does more profiling than Mulder does. Scully does all the work anyway, so whatever. Oh, but Mulder's the most empathetic character ever. Oh, God. Did we watch the same show? The people who are saying this, is this the same character we're watching? Anyway, Mulder's like, I could try to understand this guy, but he's like, nah, that'd be too much work. So Philip Paget leaves. Mulder goes down in the basement. Philip Paget's going to burn his book because he doesn't want to kill Scully. Good for you, Philip Paget. Finally did one thing right, my dude. You could have just stayed in your room and wrote fan fiction and not bothered Scully with her life. God. Anyway, Mulder has the gun trained on him, and he's like, you're burning evidence. Again, I like when Mulder is in the skeptic role, but when he is in the skeptic role, doesn't make sense more often than not. Like in this episode, it doesn't make sense. Why wouldn't Mulder see things from Paget's point of view? Why would Mulder want to be in the skeptic role in this episode? When Scully is in the believer's role, like in Revelations or Beyond the Sea, it makes sense. Okay, in Beyond the Sea, she just lost her father. She was seeing visions of her father. Of course, she was going to believe, what's his bucket? The creepy guy. God, I can't think of his name. I'm a bad X-Files fan. Anyway, and then in Revelations, she has a very deep faith. Of course, she's going to be seeing these things. But when Mulder is in the skeptic role, it doesn't make sense. And this is one of those episodes where it doesn't. So anyway, Mulder hears a gunshot. He goes upstairs. And the psychic surgeon has broken into Mulder's apartment. And he is killing Scully with his bare hands in one of the most graphic scenes in this show, full of graphic scenes. He is digging his hand between her breasts to get her heart, and it is fucking something, all right? She shoots him, nothing. Again, poor Scully, like reliving her trauma. Scully has to be traumatized in every goddamn episode, doesn't she? So, Philip Paget tosses the book into the incinerator, and because the show doesn't understand how long it takes for she's a paper to burn, it just burns up right away. Have you ever tried to burn a book? It's hard, okay? Then the Brazilian psychic surgeon disappears, and Mulder comes in. He sees Scully on the floor, presumably dead, and David Duchovny does some of his worst acting I've ever seen. And that is like, David Duchovny, I don't consider him a good actor, okay? I will always say in the X-Files, Gillian, everyone, Mitch Pileggi, Nicholas Lee, everyone is acting goddamn circles around him. He is always at 8%. Everyone else is like at goddamn 120%. So, but this is the worst acting I have ever seen David Duchovny do. Like, this is the woman he's in love with. This is the woman Mulder is in love with, that he would move heaven and earth for. And he's just looking at her like dog shit on his shoe. He's like, okay, that's kind of strange. And then, of course, Gillian, is just like, Scully just loses it. She starts crying, and I start crying. And she's like, please don't traumatize me anymore, Chris Carter. Just like, please no more. Oh, honey. Oh, baby. Oh, kiddo. You got some more trauma in store for you, Dana Scully. So then you hear a really boring monologue from Philip Paget and about how the only true stories can end in death. And again, some really good nods to writers like Hemingway and Shakespeare. When they're in the cemetery, they see Salinger, a gravestone that says Salinger. That's a pretty good touch. And Philip Paget is dead, and his own heart is in his hand because, X-Files fans are dramatic to the end. And that's Milagro. This was a whole lot of fun. I love making these videos. And I want to hear from you. If you have an episode that you think is underrated, or you have an episode you think's overrated and you want me to talk about it, or you have something to say about it, please hit me up. I love making these. I hope you love watching these. Have a good day. Mwah.